The sleek silver ship of the Galactic Council settled into orbit around the blue-green planet. Inside the observation deck, Dr. Vex pressed a long, thin finger against the viewing screen inside. His large eyes blinked slowly as he studied the third planet from this unremarkable yellow star. "So this is Earth," he said, "home to the newest spacefaring species." The other members of the science team gathered around him. They had traveled across 17 star systems to reach this remote corner of the galaxy. Their mission was simple: study the humans and decide if they were worthy of joining the Council. Dr. Vex turned to face his team. "Begin the biological scans. Let's see what we're dealing with." The aliens worked quietly, setting up their advanced equipment. Within minutes, data began flooding their screens. At first, Dr. Vex thought there must be some mistake. He reset the scanners and tried again. "This cannot be correct," he muttered. "Run the tests again." His assistant, Dr. Lin, looked up with concern. "The scanners are working perfectly. These readings are accurate." Dr. Vex stared at the results in disbelief. According to their scans, humans were walking contradictions. Their bodies contained vestigial organs with no apparent purpose. Their immune systems sometimes attacked their own cells. They required long periods of unconsciousness every day just to function. Their spines were poorly designed for upright walking. Their reproduction was inefficient and dangerous. How did these creatures ever leave their planet? Dr. Vex wondered aloud. Their biology is a complete mess. 3 days later, the alien delegation landed on Earth. They were met by a small group of human scientists at a remote research facility in a place called Montana. Dr. Tom Reed stepped forward to greet them. He was tall for a human, with graying hair and a friendly smile. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "We're honored to host the Galactic Council's science team." Dr. Vex studied the human with undisguised curiosity. How could such a poorly designed organism appear so confident? "We have many questions about your species," Dr. Vex said. Tom nodded. "That's why we're here. Our facility is at your disposal." Over the next few days, the aliens pored over human medical records. What they found only deepened their confusion. "You have thousands of genetic disorders," Dr. Vex said during a meeting with Tom. "Your species suffers from countless allergies. Your bodies contain DNA from viruses. Your cells age and die for no apparent reason. And yet, you've built cities and spacecraft." Tom laughed. "When you put it that way, it does sound pretty bad." Dr. Vex did not share the humans' amusement. "This is most troubling. Every other spacefaring species we've encountered has achieved biological optimization. Your design appears random and inefficient." Tom leaned forward. "Maybe we're not as messed up as you think. Our biology got us this far, didn't it?" The alien scientist had no answer for that. Later that evening, Dr. Vex composed his first report to the Galactic Council. His fingers hovered over the keys as he struggled to find the right words. "The humans of Earth present a biological anomaly," he wrote. "Their bodies show evidence of hasty evolution, with systems cobbled together rather than properly designed. They require constant maintenance in the form of regular fuel intake, waste elimination, and consciousness shutdown. Their bodies contain numerous vulnerabilities and inefficiencies." He paused, then added, "By all logical standards, these creatures should not survive, let alone thrive. Yet they have built a global civilization and have begun to explore their solar system. This contradiction demands further study." Dr. Vex sent the report, then gazed out the window at the starry night sky. In all his years of studying alien life, he had never encountered anything like humans. They were puzzling, fascinating, and slightly disturbing. These creatures shouldn't even be alive, he said to himself, let alone spacefaring. Little did he know, the true surprises were just beginning. Dr. Vex and his team set up their laboratory in the east wing of the Human Research Facility. They brought in specialized equipment to study these strange biological creatures more closely. Tom offered to be their first test subject, which Dr. Vex accepted with poorly hidden eagerness. Please remain still, Dr. Vex instructed as Tom lay on the examination table. A blue light moved slowly over the human's body, collecting data on every cell and system. Dr. Lin monitored the incoming information. "It's worse than our initial scan suggested," she said quietly to Dr. Vex. "Look at this organ." She pointed to an image of Tom's appendix. "What is its function?" Dr. Vex asked. Tom, who could hear their conversation, chuckled. "We're not entirely sure. It doesn't seem to do much of anything these days." Dr. Vex turned to him with disbelief. "You have an organ with no purpose." "We believe it had a function in our distant ancestors," Tom explained. "Now it just sits there until it gets infected. Then we cut it out." The aliens exchanged troubled glances. The idea of carrying useless body parts was completely foreign to them. Their own bodies were marvels of evolutionary efficiency, with every cell serving a clear purpose. "And what about this?" Dr. Lin pointed to Tom's lower back. "Ah, that's where many humans experience pain," Tom said. "Our spines weren't perfectly adapted for walking upright." Dr. Vex made notes on his tablet. "Your species willingly evolved a posture that causes pain." "Evolution isn't always perfect," Tom replied. "We make do with what we have." The tests continued for hours. With each new discovery, the aliens' confusion grew. Humans needed to drink enormous amounts of water each day. They could choke if they tried to breathe and swallow at the same time. Their skin burned in sunlight. Their teeth often grew and crooked and required artificial straightening. "How do you live like this?" Dr. Vex finally asked, setting down his instruments. Tom sat up and shrugged. "We don't know any different. It's just how we are." The next day, the alien team observed a human medical facility. They watched in horror as doctors treated allergies, autoimmune disorders, and genetic conditions. 10% of your population has these. "Allergies?" Dr. Vex asked the hospital director. "At least," the director confirmed. "Some people are allergic to foods, others to pollen or animal fur. Some humans are even allergic to other humans." Dr. Vex couldn't hide his dismay. "And your immune systems sometimes attack your own bodies for no reason." "That's right. We call those autoimmune disorders. They can be managed but rarely cured." Back at the research facility, Dr. Vex held a meeting with his team. Large screens displayed their findings on human biology. "They are walking biological disasters," he announced. "Their bodies are filled with design flaws and unnecessary components. Their cells contain viral DNA from ancient infections. Their reproduction system is ridiculously complicated. They even shut down consciousness for hours each day." Dr. Lin raised a hand. "But they've survived for thousands of years. They've built cities, created art, developed technology." "That's the greatest mystery," Dr. Vex admitted. "By all logical standards, they should have gone extinct long ago. Yet they persist." Tom entered the room, carrying cups of a brown liquid the humans called coffee. He had become comfortable enough with the aliens to interrupt their meetings. "Talking about us?" he asked with a smile, setting down the cups. "We are discussing your many biological shortcomings," Dr. Vex said bluntly. Tom nodded, unsurprised. "And what's the verdict?" Dr. Vex looked at the human with newfound curiosity. "You are inefficient, poorly designed, and remarkably fragile. Yet you've survived. We need to understand how." "Maybe being a mess has its advantages," Tom suggested. "Ever think of that?" Dr. Vex hadn't, but he was beginning to wonder if there was more to these humans than met the eye. The Joint Research Station orbiting Earth was a marvel of both human and alien technology. For 2 weeks, the studies had continued without major incidents. Dr. Vex was completing his daily report when the station's alarm suddenly blared. "Attention all personnel," the automated system announced. "Medical emergency in Section 4. Containment protocols engaged." Dr. Vex hurried to the main control room. The station director, a senior alien scientist named Dr. Moore, was reviewing security footage with increasing alarm. "What's happening?" Dr. Vex asked. "Unknown pathogen detected in the air filtration system," Dr. Moore replied. "3 of our team are already showing symptoms." On the screens, alien crew members were being helped to the medical bay. They moved slowly, their normally pale skin taking on a bluish tint. Dr. Vex checked the biological scanners. "The pathogen appears to be bacterial, possibly from one of the human samples." "Have any humans been infected?" Dr. Moore asked. "Checking now." Dr. Vex reviewed the medical scans. "Interesting. Several humans have been exposed, but only 2 show mild symptoms. The rest appear unaffected." Tom entered the control room, his face concerned but calm. "We heard about the outbreak. How can we help?" Dr. Moore turned to him with accusation in his eyes. "Your Earth bacteria have contaminated our systems. My crew is falling ill." "I'm sorry to hear that," Tom said genuinely. "Our medical team is ready to assist." Dr. Vex studied Tom curiously. "You don't seem worried about getting sick yourself." "I might already have been exposed," Tom admitted. "But humans deal with bacterial infections all the time. Our immune systems are pretty good at fighting them off." Within hours, over half the alien crew showed serious symptoms. The medical bay was filled to capacity. Meanwhile, the few humans who had developed symptoms were already recovering. Dr. Vex worked alongside the human doctors, trying to understand why the aliens were so vulnerable to this common Earth bacteria. He took blood samples from Tom and other humans who had been exposed but remained healthy. Under the microscope, human blood revealed an aggressive immune response. White blood cells swarmed around the invading bacteria, consuming them rapidly. "Fascinating," Dr. Vex muttered. "Your immune cells attack like they've seen this enemy before." Tom looked at the samples. "They probably have, or something similar. Humans are exposed to thousands of bacteria throughout our lives. Our immune systems keep a kind of memory." "Memory? In cells?" Dr. Vex was skeptical. "Something like that," Tom said. "It's why vaccines work for us. Once our body learns to fight something, it remembers for next time." Dr. Vex thought about the countless flaws they had documented in human biology. The overactive immune responses that sometimes attack the body itself. The inflammation that could become chronic and harmful. Perhaps these weren't flaws, but adaptations to a bacteria-filled world. "Can we use human antibodies to treat our infected crew?" Dr. Vex asked. Tom nodded. "We've already started synthesizing a treatment. It should be ready soon." By the next day, the treatment was working. The alien crew began to recover, their symptoms fading. Dr. Moore called a meeting of all senior staff. "This incident has revealed a serious vulnerability in our species," he admitted. "We have evolved in environments with few bacterial threats. Our immune systems are inadequate compared to humans." Dr. Vex nodded. "The human immune system is chaotic and sometimes self-destructive, but remarkably adaptive. What we thought was a flaw might actually be a strength." Tom smiled slightly. Being a biological mess has its advantages. Dr. Vex turned to his fellow aliens. "I believe we need to reconsider our assessment of human biology. Their seemingly inefficient systems contain redundancies and adaptations we lack. In the face of unknown pathogens, their messy biology gave them protection while our optimized systems failed." Dr. Moore looked troubled. "Are you suggesting that evolutionary optimization might actually be a disadvantage in some circumstances?" "I'm suggesting," Dr. Vex said slowly, "that what looks like a mess might actually be a masterpiece of survival we don't yet understand." 1 month after the pathogen incident, the Galactic Council ordered a new mission. A recently discovered planet designated KX-42 needed exploration. Its environment showed extreme variations in temperature, atmospheric composition, and gravity. The Council decided this would be the perfect opportunity to test humans against their more evolved alien counterparts. Dr. Vex, Tom, and 6 other crew members, 3 humans and 3 aliens, boarded a small exploration vessel bound for KX-42. The journey would take just 4 days using the advanced faster-than-light technology. "This is quite an honor," Tom told Dr. Vex as they prepared their equipment. "Not many humans have traveled this far from Earth." Dr. Vex nodded. "The Council is most interested in seeing how your species performs under variable conditions." What he didn't say was that many Council members expected the humans to fail miserably. Despite the incident on the space station, most aliens still viewed human biology as dangerously flawed. The ship landed on KX-42 on a calm, clear day. The sky was pale purple, and 2 small moons were visible on the horizon. Initial readings showed the air was breathable for both species, though slightly lower in oxygen than Earth. "We'll set up base camp here," the mission commander, an alien named Dr. Jax, announced. "Tomorrow we begin exploration." That night, the temperature dropped suddenly. The alien crew members, with their efficient biology, began to shut down non-essential functions to conserve heat. The humans simply put on extra layers of clothing and huddled together. "You're shivering," Dr. Vex observed as he watched Tom. "Your body's temperature regulation is clearly inadequate." Tom smiled through chattering teeth. "Maybe, but we're still awake and functioning. Your friends look half dead." Dr. Vex looked at his fellow aliens, who had entered a semi-dormant state. They would remain that way until the temperature rose again. "A fair point," he admitted. The next morning brought scorching heat. Now it was the aliens who moved comfortably in the high temperatures while the humans sweated profusely. "Your cooling mechanism is disgustingly inefficient," Dr. Vex noted, watching sweat drip down Tom's face. "You're losing precious water and minerals." "True," Tom said, wiping his brow. "But we're still walking and working while losing that water. And we can replace it." He took a long drink from his canteen. During their 2-week stay on KX-42, the planet threw everything at them. Acid rain fell for 3 days. Gravity fluctuated wildly in certain areas. Strange plants released toxic spores. Through it all, Dr. Vex observed the humans with growing fascination. The aliens, with their specialized biology, often struggled when conditions changed rapidly. During the acid rain, they had to remain in the shelter. When gravity increased, their efficient muscles couldn't adapt quickly enough. The humans, however, simply endured. They coughed through the toxic spores but kept working. They moved more slowly in high gravity but didn't stop. When food supplies ran low, they proved capable of digesting local plant life that the aliens couldn't process. On the final day, as they prepared to return to their ship, Dr. Jax slipped on wet rocks and fell, cutting his arm badly. The wound began leaking blue fluid at an alarming rate. "His healing mechanism will take too long," Dr. Vex said urgently. "He could lose too much blood before we reach the ship." Tom and the other humans quickly made a tourniquet from spare clothing. One of the human scientists, who had basic medical training, cleaned and sealed the wound using their emergency kit. "Your medicine is so primitive," Dr. Vex said, watching them work. "Maybe," Tom replied, "but we're used to patching ourselves up in emergencies. When you're as prone to injury as humans, you get pretty good at fixing yourself." As their ship left KX-42's atmosphere, Dr. Vex sat next to Tom in the observation room. "Your species performed better than expected," he admitted. "Your biological inefficiencies somehow become advantages in unpredictable environments." Tom smiled. "Sometimes being a mess is exactly what you need to survive in a messy universe." Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, Dr. Vex spent long hours in the ancient archives. The KX-42 mission had left him with questions that regular science couldn't answer. Why were humans so different from every other intelligent species? How had they survived with so many biological flaws? The archives were vast, containing records from thousands of civilizations spanning millions of years. Few researchers ventured into the oldest sections, where data was stored on crystalline structures that predated modern technology. Dr. Vex searched methodically, scanning for any mention of Earth or its solar system. After 3 days of searching, he found something unusual: a research log from a species called the Founders, who had gone extinct over 50 million years ago. System 28,371. Third planet exhibits unusual biological diversity. The log read, "Potential for experimental use noted. Approval granted for extended testing." Dr. Vex read further, his excitement growing. The Founders had visited Earth during the early days of mammalian evolution. They had found the planet's chaotic ecosystem fascinating and decided to use it as a testing ground for various biological adaptations. The third planet's organisms show remarkable resilience. Another entry noted, "Despite repeated extinction events, life continues to diversify. Recommend continued observation of mammalian evolutionary paths." Dr. Vex downloaded all references to Earth and rushed back to his laboratory. The evidence was fragmentary but compelling. Earth hadn't developed in isolation like other worlds. It had been visited, studied, and possibly even influenced by ancient species. He called Tom immediately. "I need to see you. I've found something important." They met in Dr. Vex's laboratory an hour later. Tom listened in silence as Dr. Vex explained his discovery. "You're saying ancient aliens used Earth as some kind of biological testing ground?" Tom asked when Dr. Vex finished. "The evidence suggests your planet experienced unusually high rates of disaster and change," Dr. Vex said. "Ice ages, asteroid impacts, rapid climate shifts. These created extreme evolutionary pressures. Some may have been natural, others perhaps encouraged." Tom took a moment to absorb this. "So humans aren't messy by accident. We're messy because our ancestors had to survive one disaster after another." "Precisely," Dr. Vex said. "While other intelligent species evolved in stable environments, allowing for optimization and efficiency, Earth's organisms were forced to adapt to constant change. Your appendix, your sleep cycles, your inflammation responses, these aren't flaws. They're adaptations to a planet that never stayed the same for long." Tom paced the room, thinking. That would explain our resilience during a pathogen outbreak and on KX-42. We're built to handle the unexpected. Your biological redundancies, your ability to eat almost anything, your rapid healing, all of these make perfect sense if you evolved on a planet where conditions change constantly. Dr. Vex agreed. What seems inefficient in a stable environment becomes essential in a chaotic one. Tom stopped pacing and faced Dr. Vex. "Does this mean we were engineered?" "Not exactly," Dr. Vex said. "The Founders appear to have created challenging conditions, then watched to see what happened. They were observers more than creators. Earth's life forms, including your ancestors, did the hard work of adaptation themselves." The laboratory door opened, and Dr. Moore entered. He had recovered fully from the pathogen incident, but still moved with caution around humans. "The Council has requested your final assessment of human biology," he told Dr. Vex. "They are eager to make a decision about Earth's membership status." Dr. Vex looked at Tom, then back to Dr. Moore. "Tell them I need more time. My assessment has changed significantly." "Changed how?" Dr. Moore asked. "I no longer believe human biology is flawed," Dr. Vex said. "I believe it may be the most advanced biological system we've ever encountered, not despite its apparent messiness, but because of it." Dr. Moore looked shocked. "The Council will require extraordinary evidence for such a claim, and I intend to provide it," Dr. Vex said firmly. "What we've been seeing as weaknesses in humans may actually be their greatest strength." The emergency alarms blared throughout the Galactic Council's central hub. Dr. Vex rushed to the main control room, where dozens of screens showed scenes of chaos. Medical facilities across 3 worlds were overwhelmed with patients. "What's happening?" he asked the nearest officer. "Biological attack," the officer replied grimly. "The Draz have unleashed something on Centauri Prime. It's spreading to neighboring systems." The Draz were a secretive, hostile species that had long opposed the Council's expansion. They had threatened biological warfare before, but this was the first actual attack. Dr. Moore approached, his face grim. 2 million already infected. The death rate is climbing rapidly. What kind of pathogen? Dr. Vex asked. Something engineered, Dr. Moore replied. It targets specific cellular functions common to most council species. Our medical teams are calling it perfect. It attacks with precision, bypassing all standard defenses. Dr. Vex thought quickly. Most council species had evolved along similar paths, with efficient, specialized biological systems. A pathogen designed to attack those common features would affect them all. Have there been any human cases? He asked suddenly. Dr. Moore looked surprised at the question. A few hundred humans were on Centauri Prime. They're showing mild symptoms, but none have died yet. Get me Tom Reed immediately, Dr. Vex ordered, and prepare the fastest ship available. 6 hours later, Dr. Vex, Tom, and a team of human and alien scientists were racing toward the quarantined Centauri system. In the ship's laboratory, they reviewed data on the spreading plague. The pathogen is attacking cellular communication pathways, Dr. Vex explained. It's like it has the exact blueprint for our biology. Tom studied the data, but humans are only mildly affected. Your messy biology is protecting you, Dr. Vex said. The redundancies in your systems, the chaotic way your cells communicate, they're creating a barrier the pathogen can't fully overcome. The team worked nonstop during the journey. They took blood samples from the humans aboard, studying how their immune systems responded to the engineered pathogen. Look at this, Tom said, pointing to microscope images. Our white blood cells are attacking the pathogen, but differently than yours would. We're using multiple approaches simultaneously. Dr. Vex nodded. Your immune system doesn't have one perfect solution. It tries many imperfect ones at once. Against a highly specialized threat, that messiness becomes an advantage. When they reached Centauri Prime, the situation was dire. Medical facilities were overflowing. Council species from a dozen worlds lay dying, their optimized immune systems helpless against the targeted attack. The human members of the team immediately volunteered blood samples for research. Working alongside the best medical minds in the council, they began developing treatments based on human immune responses. We need to introduce controlled biological chaos into the treatment, Dr. Vex explained to the council's head physician. The Draz designed this to exploit the predictability of our biology. Human systems are unpredictable by comparison. The physician looked skeptical. You want us to make our treatments less efficient. I want you to make them less predictable, Dr. Vex corrected. The perfect key can't unlock a door if the lock keeps changing. 3 days later, they had a working treatment. It wasn't elegant by council standards. It contained elements that seemed redundant, even contradictory. But it worked. The pathogen couldn't adapt to the chaotic approach fast enough to maintain its foothold. As the first patients began to recover, Dr. Vex sent an urgent message to the full council. The human biological model has proven essential to our survival. Their seemingly flawed design contains wisdom we have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection. I formally request that Earth be granted immediate membership in the Council, with humans recognized as equals despite their biological differences. The reply came within hours. Request granted. Humans to be recognized as full Council members with immediate effect. Their biological expertise is now classified as a critical resource. Tom found Dr. Vex in the laboratory, still working despite days without rest. I heard the news, Tom said. Seems like being a biological mess has its advantages after all. Dr. Vex looked up from his microscope. Not a mess, he corrected. A masterpiece of adaptation that we're only beginning to understand. 1 year after the Draz biological attack, the Galactic Council's Grand Chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from over 300 worlds had gathered for a historic occasion. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Council's biological classification system was being formally revised. Dr. Vex stood at the central podium, facing the assembled delegates. Beside him stood Tom Reed, now serving as Earth's official representative. In the front row sat a dozen human scientists who had helped develop treatments during the crisis. Esteemed members of the Council, Dr. Vex began. Today we acknowledge a fundamental error in our understanding of biological excellence. For too long, we have valued optimization and efficiency above all else. We believe that evolution naturally moves toward perfect specialization, systems with no redundancy, no waste. The chamber was silent as he continued. The humans of Earth have taught us that there is another path. Their biology, which we once viewed as chaotic and flawed, proved to be their greatest strength when facing the unexpected. Their seemingly inefficient immune responses saved countless lives during the Draz attack. Their ability to function in variable conditions proved superior during extreme testing. Dr. Vex touched a control panel, and a three-dimensional image appeared above the chamber, a double helix of DNA. Human DNA contains remnants of ancient viruses, multiple redundancies, and apparent contradictions. What we once called junk, we now recognize as potential, biological tools ready to be activated when needed. This is not a mistake of evolution, but its ultimate expression. Tom stepped forward to speak. Humans have always known we weren't perfect, he said simply. We break easily. We get sick often. Our bodies sometimes work against us. But we endure. We adapt. We survive conditions that should kill us. Now we understand why. Our messy biology prepared us for an unpredictable universe. The Council's High Chancellor rose from her seat. An ancient being from one of the Council's founding worlds, she rarely spoke at public gatherings. The Draz attack targeted the very things we thought made us superior, she said. Our biological predictability became our greatest vulnerability. Today, we not only welcome humans as equals but acknowledge that their different path may save us all. She raised her hand in a formal gesture. Let it be recorded that the Council officially adopts a new biological classification system. No longer will we rank species by optimization and efficiency alone. Adaptability, resilience, and biological diversity will now be recognized as equally valuable traits. The vote was unanimous. The new classification system would be implemented immediately, with humans helping to train medical personnel across Council worlds in techniques derived from Earth medicine. After the ceremony, Dr. Vex found Tom standing by a viewport, looking out at the stars. Your world has changed the course of galactic history, Dr. Vex said. Not through weapons or technology, but through biology. Tom smiled. Not bad for a species with useless organs and back problems. The research center is nearly complete, Dr. Vex said. With your help, we will study how to introduce controlled biological diversity into other species. Many Council worlds are asking for human medical advisors. And to think, Tom said, all this happened because you thought we were a biological disaster. A mistake I'm glad to have made, Dr. Vex admitted, though I still find some human traits baffling. Your need for sleep remains highly inefficient. Tom laughed. We may be part of the Council now, but we're keeping our naps. Later that evening, Dr. Vex completed his final report on human biology. The document would be stored in the Central Archives, available to all Council species. In conclusion, he wrote, human biology represents not a failure of evolution, but its most sophisticated expression. What appears chaotic contains deep wisdom. What seems inefficient provides crucial flexibility. Earth's challenging history created a species uniquely suited to face the unknown. He paused, then added a final line. Human biology is not a mess. It is a masterpiece of survival, and perhaps the greatest teacher the Council has ever encountered. Dr. Vex sent the report, then gazed out at the stars. Somewhere out there, new challenges waited. And thanks to humanity's biological mess, the galaxy was better prepared to face them.